The Baal Shem Tov has a well-known teaching that everything we see or hear has the potential to teach us a personal message for our own lives. Nothing is happenstance. And our observations of other characters and their behaviors can be part of our personal journey. We can take this teaching towards Megillat Esther. We can choose to see it as a story that happened to others. We can see it as an interesting plot with unique characters, and it begins and ends there. Or we can look at the Megillah and look at the specific behavior of individuals as role models for our own lives. Positive role models that we want to emulate, or negative role models where we see their behavior and understand that we want to avoid those choices. Let's take a look at Vashti. She's an ambiguous character who refuses the order of the king, and it does not come when she is beckoned. According to the Malbim, when she responds, the Pasuk says, instead of Vashti HaMalka, it says she responds as HaMalka Vashti. And the Malbim points out this difference, this change, and says that Vashti is refuting Achashverosh and saying, I am proud of my lineage. I know that I'm a queen in my own right, and you will not demoralize me in this way. You will not treat me in an undignified fashion. The Ralbag goes so far as to say that Vashti refuses out of a sense of modesty, of tzniut. She recognizes that self-respect, knowing her worth and dignity, modesty, all go hand in hand. A different way of seeing Vashti, but one that is empowering for us. For how often do we recognize that these go together? How often do we remind ourselves that we should be proud sons and daughters of leaders and prophets and kings? Taking a look at Achashverosh, we see a negative role model. We see the dangers of drunkenness. We learn from him that sometimes you make choices when you are in a drunken state that you cannot take back afterwards. As he wakes up from a stupor, wakes up from his wrath, in Perek Bet, he realizes, what have I done? The dangers of drinking are very relevant to Purim, for many misunderstand and misconstrue the mitzvah of Adar lo yada, of not knowing the difference between Arur Haman, the cursed Haman, and Baruch Mordechai, the blessed Mordechai. The Be'er Halacha explains and teaches us that this concept is meant to bring us closer to Hashem. We should be careful that we make choices that elevate our behavior and are ones that we are proud of after the fact. Achashverosh also teaches us the importance of listening to our inner moral compass. According to the Malbim, Achashverosh knew that Vashti had every right to refuse. He didn't want to punish her. He didn't want to treat her like a hediot, like a regular person who was ki'ilu mored b'malchut, going against the demand of the king. And yet, he succumbed. He listened to the voices of others. And he had to deal with the consequences. How often do we not have the fortitude to deal with others' opinions, even when they go against our own principles? We can be reminded of that from Achashverosh's behavior. Let's take a look at Haman for a minute. Haman, the evil Haman, what do we have to learn from him? We have so much to learn from Haman. Haman had everything. Haman had a devoted wife, many sons, friends that are called Ohavav, people who love him and care about him. And he had so much money, probably one of the richest people in his times. He had 10,000 kikar, or 460 ton of silver, which he offered Achashverosh in order to have this decree against the Jews fulfilled. A tremendous amount of money that he was able to toss for this need of his. He's so wealthy in terms of money, and yet he wasn't happy. The Pasuk tells us, "V'chol zeh einenu shoveli." All of this, all that I have, my family, my friends, my wealth, my prestige, he was up ranked up above all the other officers, second to the king. None of that mattered. Because of Mordechai, who wouldn't bow down to him. How often do we choose to focus on one thing that isn't going well? On one perceived insult or criticism? And we focus on that, and we lose sight of all of our blessings. So much good in our lives. And how often do we spend tremendous energy focusing on the one thing that isn't quite right? Most of us are guilty of acting like Haman at one point or another and losing sight of the bigger picture. One last character to take a look at is Charvona. We know the song Vagam, Vagam, Vagam. Charvona Zachor Latov. We recognize Charvona, one of the Sarisim of Achashverosh, for good. Why? Because of the word he said, Vagam. He said Vagam, and also, look what I see out the window. I see those gallows that Haman made. Let's use them for Haman instead of for Mordechai. Perhaps he knew the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The Charvona saw something and he chose to speak up. He saw something that made a difference and he did something with it. How often do we see something and we know maybe we should step in and we are quiet? How often should we be quiet and instead we speak? Knowing when to speak up is a lesson from Charvona. Hopefully we can look at Megillat Esther and the different characters in a new light this Purim. And we can learn from the teaching of Ben Zoma. As we learn in Avot, Ezehu Chacham Halabein Mikol Adam. We can be wise and we can become more wise and learn from everyone. Positive role models and negative role models alike. Have a happy Purim. Shenishma b'sorot tovot.